I feel like everybody, it's your responsibility right now to actively make sure that you don't take the black pill. Why? Look at it from Trump's perspective. Like, if you're Trump, right, and you're mulling over in your mind possible ways to, you know, end democracy in America, wouldn't priority number one be to utterly demoralize your opposition? Literally priority number one. That's like the starting point. You want to basically beat your opposition into submission. You know, a lot of people I saw were freaking the fuck out watching the Charlie Kirk memorial that was televised. And a lot of that was very scary, I'm not gonna lie. Which is an odd thing to say about a fucking memorial for a person, which turned into a political rally. Stephen Miller's speech was pretty alarming. I saw snippets of Donald Trump's speech. That was pretty alarming. The only thing I saw from Kirk's wife was the bit about forgiving her husband's murderer. And I didn't watch the rest of the speech. I heard the rest of the speech is a little fashy. So I wanted to give that a gander. But here's what I'll say. And I said it on the podcast last night. Okay. Trump's MO in terms of media has been sort of the same throughout his political career. He has adopted a philosophy, and those around him have adopted the same philosophy of projecting strength and popularity. And so you pack, what was it? The Houston, where was the memorial again? It was in some big sports stadium or something. But they project that imagery because you got to put yourself in the shoes of MAGA, who for the last 2 to 3 months, you know, they kind of act like everything's all good. But if you're like a MAGA influencer, for the last few months, you've had kind of a tough time. Nobody likes the tariffs. It's just an objectively bad economic policy that nobody likes these blanket tariffs. And the Epstein stuff is just so difficult to rationalize. And so you got to go to a kind of like dark place psychically or psychologically to defend that kind of stuff, to try to find a way to steer the conversation away from the Trump administration giving favorable terms to a convicted child rapist with Ghislaine Maxwell. And then you have to find a way to rationalize Donald Trump saying that that letter that he wrote, which is so clearly in his handwriting, is not actually his handwriting. You have to contort yourself into a pretzel. And psychologically, on some level, that's going to be difficult. And so what happens? Charlie Kirk is murdered. And I think what we're seeing right now from the right is a very deeply cynical, kind of opportunistic, seizing the moment type moment, where I think they see the Kirk murder as a means for them to change the narrative. And so now the narrative that they're going with is like, this is the turning point from which the country will never turn back from. And I think they're trying to will it into existence. They want Charlie Kirk to be this martyr that boosts Republican Party popularity with regular voters. It's pretty obvious what they're trying to do in this moment. You know, yeah, that's a fair point too. For many of them, it's an avenue to make a lot of money. That's another important part of this narrative as well, or this situation. And so when I saw that imagery of his wife on the stage in the filled stadium, and you know, my first thought was like, you know, like anytime you get a group of MAGA Republicans in one place like that, it just gives you the ick, you know. I mean, it's a pretty packed auditorium. But I think the lesson to walk away from this memorial, I think the lesson that you should take away from it is that they're trying to project this strength because they're weak, not because they're strong. The reality is that Donald Trump's approval numbers went down after Charlie Kirk was murdered. How do you fuck that up? Like, honestly, how do you fuck that up? How is it possible that one of the most prominent conservative voices, literally one of the biggest conservative voices in the entire world, was murdered? They have it on video in 4K. You can watch it in slow-mo if you want to. This guy who was basically publicly martyred. They're trying to make him a martyr, right? How is it possible that one of the world's most prominent conservative voices was murdered in a particularly barbaric fashion and Donald Trump's approval numbers go down. How is that possible? I feel like, listen, I feel like we probably all had similar thoughts after the Trump attempted assassination and after Charlie Kirk was murdered. I'll bet you most of us in both of these chats had similar concerns or fears that they could leapfrog off of these acts of violence to juice their numbers up. My mind did go to the politics. I mean, I was horrified when Charlie Kirk was murdered. That was a horrifying thing to witness. And so my first thoughts were not necessarily that, but they did go there eventually, like, oh, fuck. What if they successfully make this guy a martyr? What if they convince a bunch of normies that Democrats want to murder everybody? What if that means that next midterms are going to be like a red wave? Because, like we all have these thoughts, right? If you're paying attention to politics, it's kind of hard to avoid having those thoughts, right? But I mean, take a look at what happened when somebody tried to murder him. Bullet grazed his ear. And his numbers went up about like 2.5 points, and then they went back down within like 2 weeks. So I think what that goes to show you about Trump and his movement is that there is a hard fucking ceiling of support. There's a hard ceiling of support. Basically, no matter what, they're not going to get above like a certain point, Wanting Bird with $5. Thoughts on the 2024 election lawsuits? Do you think there's any validity, or is it just blowing on nonsense? I'm totally out of the loop about whatever you're referring to. All I know is that American election systems are quite secure. There's multiple levels of accountability. It's really hard to, that's why it's like really hard to rig elections in the United States. Because there's so many witnesses at every step of the process. So I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically, but I would not buy a lot of stock in rigged election theories. Don't worry, Hutch, Trump will do it in 26. It's just difficult to imagine what Donald Trump could do to like rig elections. I think what is the most likely outcome for 2026 is he sends in like the military to monitor like voting booths. But beyond that, it's just difficult to imagine how he could possibly rig it. I do think you're a little too trusting of authority. Wow, I mean, listen, I'm certainly not trustful of Trump. I mean, I think all of us kind of think he's going to send in the military to, monitor polling stations. But what are they going to be able to, like, what are they going to accomplish by doing that? And I remain so convinced, you guys, that if he were to do something like that, it would create, I don't know if this is the appropriate usage of this term, but I think it would create a Streisand effect. If Donald Trump like he announces 2 weeks or 3 weeks before an election that he's going to send in, the military to like monitor polling stations in fucking Chicago and Dallas and San Francisco and Los Angeles and fucking, whatever. I am so convinced that would cause a massive backlash. And I think way more people would show up to vote in that situation. That's just how like resist lib kind of voters, that's how they work, man. If you piss off the wine moms, they show up and they vote, bro. They do. I think that I'd have to look into it more, so I don't know if I should make this claim, but I think I remember reading something about how there have been instances where Republican states implemented voter ID laws and it actually backfired on them because it pissed off the energized blue voters who showed up in larger numbers. It had the opposite intended effect. So if Donald Trump were to do something like that, I am so convinced that voter turnout would go up like 5 or 10%. Just look at Russian voting. The difference is that in the United States, as far as I'm aware, everywhere in the country, there's multiple layers of accountability where there are multiple witnesses. Like the system is designed to be very, very difficult to rig. Every once in a while, you hear stories about like somebody, who threw out like a fucking box of votes or something like that. But these people get caught like a lot when they try to do this stupid shit. He would postpone them due to some fake emergency or worse, a real war. He literally cannot. He has no power to do this. Like there's no way that he can enforce this. He does not have any constitutional authorities to just cancel elections. He just can't, That's just not going to happen. Yeah. That is one thing he might try though. I legit don't even know what that would look like, because he just by what mechanism could he try to cancel elections? We don't cancel elections when we're at war in the United States. Ukraine, you know, a country like Ukraine, they do postpone elections during war, but that's laid out in their constitution. Come on, Hutch, is constitutionality really an issue at this point? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Listen to me, okay? I understand the impulse to drift towards the black pill right now, and I can forgive a little bit of hyperbole, you know, that's fine if it's just like a little bit of hyperbole. But Donald Trump right now currently is operating under the constraints of the Constitution. Like, he is checking a lot of the guardrails for sure, but, you know, he still needs to go through Congress to get a bill passed. He still needs to go through Congress to get judges confirmed. The courts have checked him several times during this administration. He's had to back off a number of policies because the courts checked him. So the system is still intact right now. Very, very much intact. Delulu Hutch on today? I mean, you would just have to explain to me what it would even look like. He stands in front of a podium and says, I'm hereby canceling the elections, the 2026 midterms. What would that actually look like? People would be like, great. You can't do that. What if there is a red wave and they vote to make 3 legal terms again? You would need a constitutional amendment to get rid of term limits, and there is no universe where that happens. Republicans would have such a good midterm performance in 2026 that they could change the Constitution. That is not going to happen. I don't think you've seen you address the people saying he could station ICE at key voting sites. Can I get your thoughts on what would happen then? I don't know. That seems a bit extreme to me. I mean, even with all the extremeness we're seeing from this administration, that seems pretty extreme. I mean, that would be, I mean, are we going into every blue city, first of all? I mean, like, are we just going into major cities? Is he going to send them into rural areas? Like, you know, we do have federal laws regarding like voting in this country. I would have to look into the Voting Rights Act, but my brain immediately goes to questioning if he would even have the authority to do something. I mean, that would be such a huge effort to do that, you guys, for like every big city across the country. I don't know, guys. Like, I'm like, everything's kind of fucked right now, and it makes me very sad a lot of the times, and I think it's correct to worry about the worst case scenario. I think it's fine to think about that, but I'm just not at the point where, you know, I'm going to spend all my waking hours thinking about the worst possible thing that Trump could do. I can't think of a more depressing and dispiriting practice. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I can guarantee you guys one thing. I promise you that this would happen, what I'm about to say. And I've said it before. But I promise you, I have never been so sure of anything in my life. I can promise you. And you guys tell me if you agree or disagree. If Donald Trump tried some shenanigans, some significant shenanigans around the time of the midterms. Well, let's take it a step further. Like, if Trump tried to cancel elections, which I really doubt. I have a hard time going that far with my worry about him. But if he really tried to do something like that, what I can promise you with 100% certainty is that it would provoke the largest protest movement the world has ever seen. That is not hyperbolic. I promise you, there would be millions of people in the street. Millions of people. Millions, okay? It would be bigger than No Kings. It would be bigger than the Women's March with the pussy hats. It would be bigger than the fucking March for Our Lives. It would be bigger than the summer of 2020 protests. It would eclipse all of those easily. Okay. This would go beyond protesting. I mean, something like that would go beyond protesting. It would be so massive. The pussy hats were pretty funny. I agree. Swanee Bird with $2. You need 2/3 of the state legislatures to amend. they're not going to amend the Constitution. Quite frankly, neither party is going to be in a position to amend the Constitution for, I don't even know how long it's going to take. It's going to take a really long time before any party has that kind of mandate from voters to change the Constitution. Canceling elections is silly. It'd be far more effective and more likely to just change some voting rules or something to give you an edge. The problem with that is that the federal government is limited in what they can do to impact election systems at the state and local level. It is up to the states. The Constitution very clearly delegates authority to the states to develop their own election systems. The Scorn one with $10. If on January 5th, I told you he was sending fake electorates to change the results and send a mob to delay the certification of the vote, you would be saying the same stuff you are saying right now. Absolutely not, by the way. I remember January 6th. I remember the lead up to January 6th. Everybody was saying this is going to be bad. Do you guys remember that? Everybody was saying that. I mean, when it happened, it was still shocking. But it wasn't necessarily surprising. Like Donald Trump was blasting out to all of his followers, come to DC on January 6th, will be wild, he posted. It was telegraphed well in advance that something bad was going to happen that day. In fact, a lot of the discourse that happened immediately after January 6th was, how the fuck did the FBI not see this coming? When all of us were like, we all see what he's doing, right? Like, hello, I was blackpill yesterday, but I'm good again. Don't be sad. I feel like everybody, it's your responsibility right now to actively make sure that you don't take the black pill. I feel like it's everybody's job to do that right now. You have to balance, you have to find a balance, but you don't have to do anything. I think you should find a balance between pragmatic concerns, rational worry or fear. You have to balance that with not, falling into an abyss of hopelessness. I feel like that's like one of the best things that you can do if you want to effectively resist the current administration. You have to find a way to not give into the black pill stuff. Why? Look at it from Trump's perspective. Like if you're Trump, right, and you're mulling over in your mind possible ways to, end democracy in America, wouldn't priority number one to be to utterly demoralize your opposition? Literally priority number one. That's like the starting point. You want to basically beat your opposition into submission. And so I feel like his job, were he ever to do something like that in the future, he's definitely going to try to take some time in the run up to that to depress the opposition. There's also an enormous incongruence between the online vibes and what is actually happening out there in the electorate. Like the online vibes have been just abysmal for the last couple of weeks for sure. There's a really ugly chapter in American history with Kirk's murder, which was, horrifying. Just on its own, just remove the politics. That's just like horrifying. And then, watching MAGA, they feel so emboldened right now to just get rid of like rights, Tim Pool is just like a really good example of this. And there's a lot of this kind of vibe going around right now. Let me see if I can find it. Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee, he tweeted, "I've been disappointed to see how many have been willing to abandon free speech, and not reluctantly, but eagerly." I think he means people on the right. And then Tim Pool responds with, "What would the left have to do or collectively support for you to opt not to defend them? Serious question. At what point do you say I won't help my enemies?" Which is just, that's a very not so subtle way of saying past a certain point, I don't believe that my enemies deserve rights. That's what he's saying. And he is certainly not alone in that view. This is a really kind of prevalent narrative or prevalent kind of sentiment that we're seeing in right-wing spaces after Kirk's murder. But again, I would just appeal to your logic in this spot. Put yourself in the shoes of a MAGA person. They're jumping all over this as aggressively as they can. because they have not had a great like few months. Like Donald Trump has, it's not been great for them defending Donald Trump. If you think it's easy for them to just do this full-throated support for Donald Trump 24/7, I mean, for some people who have literally no principles and no scruples whatsoever, maybe they sleep just fine at night, but they're exhausted. They were exhausted. I mean, just put yourself in their, like literally put yourself in their shoes. Like imagine having to defend Donald Trump over the Epstein stuff. Like imagine like that would be tough. That would be tough for me. That would be tough for, I just wouldn't fucking defend it, to be honest with you. Tagarung with $5, lifelong optimist and former Republican here. If he tries to change the outcome of the election again, we are way past protesting. If he tries to unilaterally just say, I mean, like, hang on, let's just try to game this out, okay? If he says we're canceling elections, I don't think his base is enough to withstand that kind of pressure. I mean, if he tried to literally cancel elections, now, you know, this is alarming, right? But what percentage of the country would go along with something like that? 20%? Like maybe 20%? It would be a massively, massively unpopular move. Here's another thing to consider here. I didn't really anticipate opening up the stream with trying to combat the black pill, but here we are. Here's another thing that I think is really important, okay? When we look at people like Mussolini and Hitler and Pol Pot, a big part of the reason they were able to basically take over the government, consolidate power, is because they were actually delivering something for the people. With Germany, it was getting out of like a crippling economy. It was delivering better material conditions for not everybody in Germany, obviously, but for Germany. Donald Trump is not doing that right now. The economy is doing worse now that he's come to power and he's been sitting in the White House for the last 9 months. Hutch needs to do an 8-hour stream of just reacting to Fox News and then try to tell us how MAGA feels. They aren't feeling bad about anything. They are winning and want more blood. They're winning, like they won in November, if that's what you mean, but they're not winning right now. This is a weakened president. He's weakened politically. He's lost a lot of support. He's cratered with independence. I don't even think they think they're winning. I think they're trying to project that they're winning, though the numbers tell a totally different story. It's naive to think that they won't do their best to try to rig an election. Literally already tried it. Donald Trump tried it after the fact to concoct like a fake elector scheme, but either motivated out of principled support for liberal democracy or motivated by a desire to not, you know, be convicted of felonies. We did not see, I mean, we saw state officials in, you know, red Georgia refuse to go along with what Trump was saying. There's a lot of legal exposure if you try to fucking rig an election in the United States. Did you see CNN's polls? Are you talking about Harry Anton talking about like Democratic Party stuff? I did see that, yeah. Not ideal, but what we're seeing in actual special elections are telling a pretty clear story right now. I think the most likely outcome in either 2026 or 2028 is a rerun of January 6th, meaning a simple refusal to accept results they don't like. He'll never, I mean, that's for sure. I mean, we know that 1000%. Like Donald Trump is gonna, you know, I think the most likely situation, I agree with you. I think that we're gonna have midterms. The Democrats are probably gonna have a good night. We're gonna take the House back. And Donald Trump is going to complain that it was all rigged. But at the end of the day, come January 2027, they're going to be sworn in. And the new Congress will convene and elect a new House Speaker. And we'll be off to the races of a lame duck presidency for the next 2 years or for the following 2 years. He doesn't have to suspend elections. Such January 6 2.0 will work this time. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Really doubt it. I don't think he has the kind of support that he would need to do something like that. Okay, this stuff is all very doomer. Yeah, that's why, honestly, that's why I needed to take a couple days just to play fucking Borderlands. I was so fucking bummed yesterday. Yesterday, I had kind of like a 1,000-yard stare. Yesterday, I looked like a fucking grunt coming out of the trenches in World War I. I just had that fucking stare because, I'm confronted with a lot of people who are expressing black pill stuff right now, which is semi-common, but I feel like it kind of reached a new plateau in the last couple weeks. It seems like the black pill has infected more minds in the last couple of weeks. And I think after interacting with so many people who are expressing hopelessness, it just made me fucking sad. And so yesterday I just played fucking Borderlands all day. It's fucking great. Borderlands is fucking great. When he did January 6th the first time, his numbers dropped to the lowest point they ever got. He was down in the fucking 30s. He was down to like 35 after January 6th. It still to this day is a very unpopular event, you know? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the MAGA support, we just need to understand that there's a certain percentage of our country that are comfortable with a dictator. And that is deeply unsettling. I understand that. I mean, that's unsettling to me. When I see Stephen Miller making his speech where he's like screaming essentially at people like me and you, saying, you are nothing. You produce nothing. What was the fucking... Hold on, let me show you the... Now, this was blackpilling, if you want to... I saw this. I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. This is... I mean, this is dark. This is very dark.
Der Sturm flüstert dem Krieger
oh, Jesus Christ.
zu, dass ihr meiner Kraft nicht widerstehen könnt. Und der Krieger flüstert zurück.
Okay, I didn't realize that's what it was.
We will...
Here it is. All right. That works too. Yeah. It's I'd say that's fitting.
defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened.
He's talking about like normie Democrats, by the way. He's not just talking about like Antifa. He's talking about normie Democrats. He's talking about you. He's talking about me. You know.
They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us. Because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing.
You know, I got a partner. I mean, first of all, I'm not fomenting violence against him, but when he says this, you know, he's not just talking about the people that foment violence. He's talking about everybody. He's talking about everybody on the left. That's what they're saying. It wasn't some guy who chilled Carly Kirk. My goodness, who killed Charlie Kirk. It was the entire left-wing movement in this country. It was the entire Democratic Party broadly. We are all according to him, collectively responsible for his murder.
Those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness. You are jealousy. You are envy. You are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing.
I mean, I have a fiance. I have a lot of friends. You know, I hung out with some friends this weekend. I have family. I have cats. I built a business. I produce stuff, you know, most days of the week. Like I'm doing, you know, I have an okay life. Like I have things, you know.
You can create nothing. We are the ones who build.
It's in the name. Content creator, okay? That's what I do for a living.
We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal. You have immortalized Charlie Kirk. And now millions will carry on his legacy. And
it's actually really hard in a moment like this for any country. It's actually really hard to console a grieving nation, to heal divisions, to unite in a time when things are very much polarized. And yet it is the correct and morally good thing for any leader to do. And it is, it's also an opportunity for the worst actors to exploit people's anger and grief. And like, I grieved after Charlie Kirk died, but not necessarily for him. I didn't really respect that man or what he stood for. But the grief that I felt was like kind of like, this is going to sound kind of cringe. And I'm a little bit older. And so I think about things differently. I literally grieved for my fucking country. That's where I was coming from. I was sad because I knew that they were going to do this. They keep saying like, you have no idea what's coming. It's like, well, we kind of do, you know. I feel like this was very predictable, you know. You have no idea what you've awakened in this country, and you have no idea what comes next. It's like, kind of, you know, we kind of know. Like, who didn't know that you guys were going to fucking fully lose your shit after this and try to use it to cynically exploit your supporters and promote division in the country and use this event to launch draconian measures against your perceived enemies? I mean, everybody knew you were going to do this. It's not like you're throwing a curveball here, you know, like this is all pretty predictable.
We will devote the rest of our lives to finishing the causes for which Charlie gave his last measure of devotion. You cannot defeat us. You cannot slow us. You cannot stop us. You cannot.
People don't realize how big Charlie was. I think that was true in the beginning, you know. I definitely had that thought, like when we were in the first week. I knew that this was, you know, people were saying we need to compare this to Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy. And I feel like most people in my orbit dismissed that as kind of ridiculous. But to be honest with you, I kind of agree. Not because Charlie Kirk was, you know, comparable to Martin Luther King or JFK, but I kind of agree in terms of the significance. Because he did mean a lot to a lot of people. For millions of people, he was their introduction into politics. A lot of young people, a lot of young men. Not just men, but for a lot of people, he was the guy that got them interested in politics. They looked to him to set an example, and they saw him as you know, he was a very significant guy, you know, very significant guy. We saw massive movements, thousands of people in the streets across multiple countries. So his influence was not even limited to the United States. You know, put aside whether you think he deserves that kind of credit or adulation. Is that the word? What is that? Adulation. Obsequious flattery, excessive admiration or praise. Set aside if you think he was worthy of that kind of adulation and praise, worship. Your opinion about whether or not he deserves it doesn't really matter. He was tremendously influential. He also represented a new kind of like tip of the spear in online media, which is still pretty new. You guys understand that? Social media and alternative media and grassroots political movements that are driven by social media, that's still a very new concept. Adoration is another, reverence. And he represented, quite literally the tip of the spear for that kind of engagement in politics. That's why he was so important to a lot of people. In many ways, and this is just a neutral statement, in many ways, he was a fucking trailblazer. He sort of set a template for other people to emulate. Not just right-wingers. I'm not trying to gas him up in terms of, all of that. But even if you didn't like Charlie Kirk, you can't deny that he was very, very innovative. Also well-funded. You know, if you give anybody tens of millions of dollars, you know, you give the right people that kind of funding, and, you know, I'm sure a lot of people could have done what he did, but he was a really, really important guy to a lot of people. And so I certainly was saying that, like the first couple of days, I was saying like, I think this is a big deal. I think this is a really, really big deal. Can you please explain your optimism here? You say people are too black-pilled, midterms will be just back to normal for all. Then say killing Kirk equals MLK and framing politics for the next gen. I don't even call it optimism. I think it's pragmatic. I think the way that I'm looking at things right now is pretty realistic. Trump just doesn't have any kind of mechanism to stop the midterms. And it's really difficult to rig midterms. They might try to put up obstacles, but Our election systems in the United States are very, very, very good. We have very good election systems. They are specifically engineered to make it nearly impossible to rig. There's so many layers. There's so many levels of, like, you know, this person sends it to that person sends it to that person. And at every level, there's like witnesses there. There's a lot of legal exposure to trying to rig elections. And, you know, if you don't want to believe that right wingers in red states really do want to do the right thing and execute on an election, like a safe election or an accurate election, then you should fall back on people not wanting to go to jail for this kind of, and people go to jail all the time for the smallest levels of shenanigans. You know, you read about like some Republican official in North Carolina who like threw a box of votes into a creek or something like that and then went to jail, you know. Not a small thing. So, you know, here's what I will say is, like, if we get to the midterms and all of a sudden we see dozens or hundreds of Republican state officials across a bunch of red states actually just fucking step over that line and full on try to rig the election, here's what I'll say to that. That at that point, I think you get to say, like, take the black pill, it's the only pill. Because at that point, what they're signaling is that they have full confidence that Donald Trump is never going to leave, that the Republicans are never going to give power to the Democrats. Because if they did, they would go to jail.
We will carry Charlie and Erica in our heart every single day and fight that much harder because of what you did to us. You have no idea. The dragon you have awakened. You have no idea.
I think we have a pretty good sense.
How determined we will be to save this civilization, to save the West, to save this republic.
Oh, my goodness. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the best scene in the entire sequel trilogy of Star Wars. The General Hux speech that he gives right before they fucking wipe out that entire, like, solar system. He delivered that line. That was so fucking hard. He went so hard in that scene. He was fucking horrifying in that scene. That was literally the best scene in the entire sequel trilogy. And then they turned his character into a fucking ridiculous meme. God, what wasted. That's what the sequel trilogy is, man. It's just fucking wasted potential. Kylo Ren's character was fucking awesome. He was for sure the best part of the sequel trilogy, I think. And then they fucking ruined him in the third movie. They ruined him. Rise of Skywalker, I was so angry watching that movie. I was so angry because it was obvious, like, right away in the movie. It was like JJ, he might as well have called it, you know, Star Wars Episode 9. You know, we're sorry about Episode 8. That's what it should have been. It was just an apology for nothing that and they had nothing to apologize for. Episode 8 was fucking great, man. I saw that movie on opening night in a packed theater, and the crowd that I saw it with went fucking nuts. They went nuts. They went nuts when fucking Princess Leia flew through space. They went nuts when the Holdo did that maneuver. They did nuts when fucking Kylo Ren and Rey did the back-to-back and started fighting those dudes. They went nuts. I remember the auditorium or the theater that I saw that movie in gasped. They gasped. That's a hard word to say, gasped. There were multiple audible gasps throughout the theater when the sound, like in the Holdo maneuver, when she fucking just light speed through the fucking Imperial fleet or whatever, they're not the Empire, what do they call it? The First Order fleet. When she did that, and then everything gets quiet in the theater because you're in space and you can't hear anything in space. When that happened, fucking 36 people in the theater were like, sorry, I don't mean to hijacking the stream to talk about Star Wars. I shouldn't have done that. But then there's an interesting kind of nerd. I love, like, the Star Wars nerd discourse. I got this from Connor Points. I didn't know that there was so much controversy about the Holdo maneuver until I talked to Connor Points about it, and he explained it. I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense, because it's like, how come nobody else has done this before? How come nobody else used a small ship to go light speed and destroy an entire fleet? Like, the fact that you can do that in Star Wars now kind of like breaks Star Wars. I didn't even know that that was like a controversial thing. All right, we gotta get through some of these videos, guys, before the end of the stream.